We live in a twilight world. Let's talk about shadowgraphy. Yeah, this is obviously the book that is called Magic, Stage Illusions and Scientific Diversions with Trick Photography. Yeah, it's a book from the Victorian era. So what we're going to do is compare Victorian stage magic or entertainment. Yeah, we're going to compare it with today's modern world and the illusions that exist, especially on the world stage. So anyway, shadowgraphy. I'm not going to read all of this. I can't be bothered. I'm not in the mood. I'm pretty sure most of you know what we're talking about. Yeah, this right here. So you use light and you project that light upon a wall, and then the artist, using his hands, creates silhouettes. Yeah, he creates a shadow that is obviously a silhouette on the wall. And obviously he can manipulate his hands and create, you know, lots of different shapes, moving shapes. Yeah? Shadowgraphy, shadow puppetry. That's what we're talking about. This is quite a good image here. Looks a bit like Plato's cave, doesn't it? But this is obviously like on a screen here. The audience would be the other side of the wall. So the light on this one is being projected onto the screen. And you've got these folks down here moving around all of the objects. In this case, instead of it being hands, it's objects. Which creates, you know, moving images. Moving silhouettes. Yeah. So this is different. This is like a very basic version where you can see the artist putting his hands in front of the projected light. And this is more of a modern version where the shapes, the objects are the other side of the screen, with the light being projected on the screen, yeah? So I talk about this a lot, light and shadow, very similar to smoke and mirrors, very important in stage magic, in creating illusions, yeah? Very clever, very basic. Now, if we go along with the idea, the notion that once upon a time we were cavemen, I'm not saying it's true, but we're just going to entertain that idea, then obviously the game changed once we created fire. And you know the story, apparently we were given the knowledge to create fire from Prometheus. But anyway, so the first place we really was inside the cave. And the first thing we had was fire. Fire creates light. Therefore, I'm going to assume that cavemen were creating shadows on the wall with their hands and with, you know, sticks and stones and whatever. But what the point I'm trying to make here is, once again, this is one of the earliest forms of projection that has ever existed. If we go along with the notion that we were once upon a time cavemen. The other one would be cave paintings. I spoke about this in another video. The first form of magic ever to exist, the first form of anything, is us drawing paintings on the wall and then visualizing that painting and then making it come real. Because most cave art is us, the humans, hunting whatever. Hunting cows, deer, woolly mammoths, you know. By the way, I know, before anyone tries to be a smart ass, I know that could all be a Masonic hoax, yeah? And it could have been painted 100 years ago, but they're claiming that it's thousands upon thousands of years ago. But like I said, let's just go along with the notion. Because to me it makes sense, yeah? Because the thing is that we didn't paint cave paintings after the hunt. We painted them before. This was our earliest form of entertainment, especially in Europe, yeah? In Europe, in wintertime, we can't really see the stars so much because of the weather, yeah? Windy, grey above, cold, sometimes even snowy, depending where you are. So what do we have for entertainment? That was our first form of TV back in those times, yeah? Cave paintings, and then, again, creating shadows on the cave wall. Which, of course, when you talk about things like that, you can't help but think of Plato's cave, yeah? Shadows on the cave wall. Us believing they are real. The shadows being used as a way to control us and keep us living in fear. Outside of the cave is the real world, the monad, the blinding light of truth. But yeah, let's not get too caught up or too sidetracked by Plato's cave, yeah? The important thing here is light and shadow. Light and shadow being used as a form of entertainment, but also as a form of illusion, yeah? Because if we go back to this picture here, you know, these stage hands would obviously be moving these along the screen here, creating a moving picture. You know, back in Victorian times, that's pretty impressive, right? This is before TVs existed. So that would have been pretty mind-blowing to the average person. But even just in general, at a party or whatever, you know, this is a form of art. You know, some people are very good at this. And, yeah. It's got a whole chapter here in the book about magic, stage illusions, and scientific diversions. So it's worth a read if you want to read it. So let's get to it, yeah? How does this relate to a modern day world stage theatre and illusion warfare? Yeah, and you know, once again, I could probably do a 7-hour presentation on this topic, but I'm not going to do that because people have got very short attention spans these days. Nobody's going to watch it anyway. So yeah, I'm just going to put out a few examples of what I would consider light and shadow, shadowgraphy in today's age, on the world stage, in relation to illusion warfare, yeah? You know, sometimes it's literal, sometimes it's metaphoric, sometimes it's allegory. But anyway, here is my first example, yeah? And this relates to what's going on currently, the war that's supposedly happening in the Middle East, 2026, March. Lots of the bombs that are being dropped over in the Middle East are landing on silhouettes, yeah? Painted silhouettes of fighter jets, helicopters, tanks, and so on, right? Now, this is the first time that the internet and internet people have kind of picked up on it. If you've been with me since the beginning, I've been saying this for years, right? This is what is happening in most war zones from now back until the earliest forms of aircraft were invented, right? So, and before anyone tries to be, you know, yet again, be a smart ass and say that this picture is an AI generated picture, maybe it is an AI generated picture, I don't know, I just screenshotted it off Google, but it represents what I'm talking about, yeah? So, they basically paint a silhouette of their jets on the floor, the enemy comes and they bomb the silhouette. Now, like I've said, over the past couple of years, this has been going on for years and years and years. The thing is, the fighter, the bomber, the pilot of the bomber aircraft, he goes home and he believes for the rest of his life that he has blown up some enemy aircraft. He will probably get some medals on his chest. He will do some interviews. He will write books about it. Yeah, about his 6-month tour of the Middle East, when day in, day out, he was bombing enemy aircraft. When actually he wasn't. He was bombing shadows on the floor. Once again, it's also a victory for, you know, in this case, the Iranians who are painting the silhouettes on the floor. You see, they come out the next day and they see that the enemy, the US or Israel, Air Force has flown over and bombed their silhouettes. They consider that a victory, right? So both sides are, in their own minds, in the fear of their minds, are winning here, aren't they? Yeah, they're both in their own minds thinking, this is a victory. We've done what we meant to do. Yeah. So this is like a very obvious, literal example of silhouettes. Shadows, yeah? Shadows on a cave wall being used in deception and theatricality to create the illusions of war, which, for those participating, is a very, very real experience. Yeah? Not to repeat myself, but the fighter jet, it's a very real experience for him. For these guys working at the airbase, which is probably an empty airbase, this is a really, very real experience, isn't it? Painting this on the ground, and then waiting for the day the enemy aircraft fly overhead and bomb the decoy targets. It's all a very real experience for everyone. Yeah, that's the whole point of illusion warfare. Yeah? To appear real. Yeah? You're making it a fully immersive experience that appears real to the uninitiated. So yeah, this is my first example. I'm sure most people get what I'm talking about right here. It's weird. What is weird though is that this current war in the Middle East, 2026, yeah, a lot of the stuff that I was talking about or have been talking about for the past 5 years, whenever, you know, I first come around on the 2021, right? And a lot of the stuff I was saying, people just couldn't believe it. They were like, no, there's no way this is happening. But with this war, it's being pushed heavily, which is quite interesting, okay? This is, in my opinion, double-cross psychology, yeah? It's their way of kind of counteracting people like me, right? Because they don't want the glory to come to me to be exposing these illusions. So they're giving it to people as a form of chicken feed to make them a part of it, right? Because at the end of the day, the ultimate goal of this war is, first and foremost, to get people onto the internet, yeah? To push forward the fourth industrial revolution, which is you, in some way, shape or form, sitting in front of the black mirror and a camera that's attached to the black mirror. Yeah? The first industrial revolution was getting you into a factory. The second industrial revolution was getting you into an electrified factory of a production line. The third industrial revolution was getting you into an office. Yeah, the IT, telecommunications revolution. The fourth industrial revolution, which they're calling cyber personal, is about getting you in some way, shape or form to have your whole life connected to the internet of things. Whether you're a content creator, a content consumer, whatever, a blogger, an influencer, a Redditor, a reviewer, it doesn't matter, yeah? So I know it kind of sounds ridiculous to most people, like why they're dropping bombs, theatricality and deception, with a main goal is so that people across the world sit in front of a computer screen. Yeah, man, that's what it is. Yeah, that's not the only objective, that's the main objective. There's lots of sub objectives, and that's obviously to rearrange the world structure. Yeah. So, you know, they're saying it costs $1 billion a day for the US and Israel to be conducting these bombing campaigns. But the amount of disruption it's causing with like the flow of oil around the world means these oil industries are going to make billions. Yeah? The government is going to make billions. The military industrial complex is going to make billions. Yeah? And platforms like Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, Telegram, all of them, yeah, they're the amount of energy and attention that's going to go into these platforms. And remember, attention is the true currency in this reality. It's going to go through the roof. There's already memes flying around about how people are basically practically giving themselves mental illness, trying to monitor the situation, right? Yeah. So yes, they will mobilize the military and deceive the military on both sides to theatrical interception, drop bombs on silhouettes, purposely so they can push forward the fourth industrial revolution, which ultimately creates a panopticon reality, doesn't it? Because while you're sitting in front of the Black Mirror, watching things on the Black Mirror is watching you. Yeah, it's monitoring every bit of your movement. It's a surveillance state like no other. And, if you remember the book 1984, the whole reason that they were getting away with this authoritarian surveillance state was because there was an invisible war going on in the background. No one could really see, but they were only hearing about it via radio and TV and government information, right? The reason everyone was poor, the reason that surveillance was so ridiculously extreme, the reason why everyone was spying on each other, the reason why food was getting rationed was because of this war in the background. And just every now and again, a bomb would drop in London, right? Which made the war seem real. Now, the book doesn't officially say that the war was being engineered and manipulated. But for me, I would say that it was being engineered and manipulated by the heads of the three factions, right? Oceania, Eurasia, and East Asia, right? At the very, very top of the pyramid of each one of those, they're pretty much, in bed with each other because it keeps them in power. It gives them ultimate power, and it gives them the reason to have so much control over the masses. Remember, the purpose of the illusion is to manifest a real response. Anyway, let's look at my second example. I'm only going to give 2 examples today. Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. Yeah? Dubai is a silhouette city, if you know what I mean. If you don't, I'll explain right now. It is an artificial city that's been made in the desert. Yeah? Same with Abu Dhabi. I'd even say Muscat. Maybe even Doha, Kuwait City. These are all cities that have been created in the desert by the British Empire. Yeah? Now, the problem with these cities, Dubai in particular, the reason I'm picking on Dubai is because at the start of this war in the Middle East, 2026, Dubai was hit with one drone. Yeah, just one drone hit Dubai, but somehow Dubai became the focus of attention on this war. While allegedly many bombs were dropping in Iran, the main coverage was all about Dubai. Now, I spoke about this in a previous video. That's because Dubai has a ridiculous amount of influencers, yeah? People that make a living on the internet and that film everything. So it made sense from an illusion warfare point of view to make a big thing about that, because then these useful idiots will, via the use of the Black Mirror, be a part of the performance. But anyway, these are, like I said, silhouette cities. Yeah? The food is imported. The water is imported. The workers are all imported from places like India, Pakistan, and the Philippines. Yeah? And all of the businesses are kind of like most businesses. They don't really need to exist. And it's all part of the fake jobs market, the fake economy. Yeah? Now, you can look at the architecture. This is obviously a very British place, right? You can tell this was built by the British. Yeah? Another one of these City of London satellite places. But I don't know, man. It is, I don't know how else to describe it other than a silhouette that exists in the desert. Yeah? Now you've got to remember that the way the British Empire has been so powerful, other than organised crime and terrorism and conquest, is oil, controlling oil, right? Now, back in the day, you know, definitely in the Victorian times, the British Empire's main rival was the Ottoman Empire. So when the British finally beat the Ottoman Empire, what they did was all of these Gulf Arab states, because you remember the Ottoman Empire was Turkey, Persia, and Arabia. Yeah? What the British did was they empowered the Arabians as a way to keep the Persians and the Turks down. Yeah? So all of these, you know, like the Saudi royal family, they were inserted by the British. Yeah? The Iranian regime was inserted by the British. Yeah? But as a fail-safe, you know, what they do is, of course, a double-cross system, divide and rule. Yeah, gangs and counter-gangs. You make sure each side is kind of rivaled against the other side. So if one does potentially become a problem, you arm the neighbours and get them to fight and control both sides of the war and just make them both wipe each other out. So that's why they built these cities in the desert, so they could use the Arabs as a way to, you know, be proxies via oil. And of course, at a later date, the British changed the world currency to the dollar. And then, of course, later on, the British created the petrodollar, which, of course, brings the Americans into the fold. And, you know, this created what they call the GCC. The Gulf Council Cooperation, also known as the Cooperation Council of the Arab States of the Gulf. Yeah, Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. Now, GCC, you couldn't get more Freemasonic if you tried. G is obviously seventh letter of the alphabet, but the Freemasons use this because it represents genius, it represents God. Yeah, that's why it's in the center of the square and compass. And obviously CC, that's 33 in numerology. Once again, Freemason. Freemasons are the civilian arm of MI6, yeah? So things like economy, industry, politics, culture, religion, that's what the Freemasons deal with, yeah? Whereas MI6 is military intelligence. So they're dealing with bombs, bullets, tanks, espionage, assassinations, terrorism, organized crime. These guys are, like I just said, economy, industry, politics, culture, religion. So yeah, man. And also, you know, the British Empire is a double cross. Freemasonry is a double cross. And of course, the British Empire created Israel, which is a double cross. And this whole current situation in the Middle East revolves around Israel. Is it real in Israel? So it's another double cross, 20 committee war where they're controlling all sides. But anyway, you know, back to the silhouette city that is Dubai, the artificial city with imported water, imported food, imported workers, imported influencers, and fake money created from petrodollar oil manipulation. It'll be interesting to see what happens with this silhouette city, right? Will it be sacrificed? Considering that it doesn't really need to exist, that it's just a silhouette, a shadow city that has been created by the British Empire in the middle of a desert full of people that are being paid to be there. You know, it will be very interesting to see if this is a potential candidate for a city that's going to get you know, obliterated to create the illusions of war, you know, because, you know, like we said, yeah, one drone landed into a building somewhere, and the amount of theatricality and deception that surrounded that was insane, right? And even now, to this day, like, it must have been 10 days ago, I think, maybe. Not too sure. But they're still talking about it, right? They're still talking about it. And of course, Dubai sits on the Straits of Hormuz. So, yeah. I mean, what we're told is, like, regarding, like, narrative control, because, you know, the magician needs to give you a narrative, yeah, that goes along with the theatricality and deception. Yeah, so it all links together. Because what you perceive in the theatre of your mind ultimately, you know, needs to align with the deceptions they're creating out on the street. But what they're saying is Iran is apparently attacking these GCC countries, these Gulf states, because they allow Western countries like the USA. I mean, every USA base has British personnel on it, but for some reason they only focus on American troops. They're saying that, you know, because these Gulf Arab states are allowing the USA to use their land to conduct strikes, they're now potential targets. Yeah. So I don't know, man. It might, you know, I don't like making predictions. I mean, it's a very new city and a lot of money's been pumped into it. So it's, you know, so I don't really know. It's not quite the same as like the Donbass in Ukraine. You know, when we think of the Donbass in Ukraine, that's the population there before the war started had dropped by almost like 12 million. So that's 12 millions worth of empty houses, empty villages, empty towns, yeah, empty commie blocks. So you can get away with staging a war in eastern Ukraine because no one lives there. Yeah? Endless empty villages, empty houses. Yeah? Abandoned farms, abandoned factories. That's how they're getting away with just blowing the shit out of it. No one lives there. You can drop bombs all day long. Yeah? And as we like to say, what they're going to do is bomb back better. So they're going to bomb it all, and then at some point in the future, they're going to obviously rebuild it as a nice new place. So eastern Ukraine definitely is ideal for creating the illusion of war. Abu Dhabi and Dubai, I don't know, man. It's possible. Because a lot of people were saying or speculating that just from that one drone strike that Dubai will never be the same again. It's lost its reputation as the safest place on earth, and a lot of the influencers that are holding up the economy there don't want to be there. So, you know, once they leave, what's the point of having all of them imported workers, like all of the Indians and the Philippine people and, you know, the slave labor from places like Pakistan and India? Like, they're not. There's no reason for them to be there, is there? And if the ability to import food and water stops, you know, this place is going to be evacuated rapidly. Yeah. Once a place is evacuated, that's when the bombs start dropping, isn't it? What they don't tell you when they're presenting you these wars and conflicts on the TV and internet and radio is that it's been evacuated first. Then the bombs start dropping, yeah? But they flip that storyline around and say the bombs started dropping, that's why people evacuated, yeah? That's the deception there that they play upon everyone. So yeah, I don't know. The main point I wanted to make is that this is a silhouette in the desert, a silhouette city. So that is my second example of shadowgraphy, yeah? This one, the second one, is a lot more metaphorical, isn't it, than actual. But yeah, that's it for this recording. We live in a twilight world. There are no friends at dusk.